All right, guys. So I'm here with Larry McDonnell here. And so the cool thing, so Larry does martial arts. He and I have known each other for a long time, really. It seems like I don't really keep track, but maybe a decade, I think.
Yeah, give or take a few.
Kind of talked off and on. And this is the first time that we've talked where we can actually see each other randomly, right? Because we normally talk via email or text or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's kind of cool. So this is the first time that he and I get to talk kind of in person. This is what we'd call in person in 2020, and we're still in technically in 2020. So, but anyway, what I wanted to do today is talk. Larry's wrote, besides being a martial artist, pretty much your whole life. Is that right?
Yeah, I started in 1999. I was about 17 years old. So
Yeah.
started
So I
karate
mean,
then.
so yeah, I've been doing this pretty much your whole life, and now you've wrote a book that has some martial arts in it, but he also is. Would you say the guy is a detective, or how would you say it?
He's
let's make.
Huh?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Let's make this easier. Go ahead and just talk about the book, and then talk about yourself. Let's make it easier.
Yeah. So the book is the Affair, a radio detective agency novel. The main character is Roger O'Hare. He's a private investigator. In this particular story, he reluctantly takes a case in which this lady is asking him to investigate her husband because she thinks he's cheating on her. And so he does. But throughout the story, him and his partner, they get ambushed several times, and they end up having to fight their way out of various types of situations. And all the training that I've had over the years, they were kind of just going through my head. So I started writing them down and kind of try to bring them to life a little bit.
So when did you first have the idea for this character or this book in general? Has it been a while?
The character himself has been floating around in my head for probably about a good 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and about 2 years ago, this particular story came to mind when I'd read a newspaper article from Australia. Thought it was kind of interesting. And it's like, hey, this is something my character would, investigate. So I started writing it, and it actually took me about 6 months to write. And then I spent the rest of the time just kind of massaging it, making it better, getting it edited, and just adding stuff to it here and there.
Yeah. So now, do you have a background in literature or anything like that, or is this just something you kind of had a passion in?
Just something I just wanted to try. Never.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've listened to a lot of. What kind of got it started was I was listening to a lot of old-timey radio detective shows like The Shadow, Dick Tracy, Sherlock Holmes, a lot of those, and scenes just kind of kept playing through my head. I was like, I've got to write these down. I'll hope that one of these days that if it becomes a book, somebody will pick it up and want to make a movie out of it. So
yeah, awesome. So what is your process when you write stuff down? Do you physically write pen and paper? Are you more of like a typer, or say it on tape?
On the computer. Yeah, just do it on the computer. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Really? So, and then we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but I, quite honestly, since I get punched in the face, I already forgot. So it's good. It's like asking you again. But how long did this take? Did you say about 3 years? Is that right? Or
the original character came to mind around about 5 years ago. But this particular story took me about 2 years to get it out of my head and onto the paper.
So when you write, I mean, because obviously I've never wrote a book or did anything like that. Is there a lot of like drafts? I mean, like a first draft, second draft? Are you fixing a lot, editing a lot?
Yeah, there's a lot of drafts. So like this one in particular, I think there's probably about 20 different versions. I would go in, I'd write down stuff, sit there, let it marinate for a while. Oh, hey, I could do this. Go back in, add more stuff, and just kind of flesh it out. And then eventually I handed it off to my wife. She loved it. So she would, give some advice like, hey, how about you do this? These people would have this type of reaction. And then eventually I would, hand it off to my friends. They looked at it for a while and they would offer advice on how to make it a little bit better, how to transition from scene to scene. And then eventually I reached out to an editor and they looked at it and they loved it. She handed it back to me. She's like, "Hey, I hope there's a second story coming because I really
Right.
want to read
That's
it."
awesome.
And I was
Yeah.
like,
Well,
"Cool."
yeah, it's probably exactly what you want to hear, right? Yeah, it
Yeah,
doesn't get any better.
exactly. That's like a big boost of confidence right there.
Yeah. So did she actually do much editing, or did you have it pretty much done by the time she saw it?
Mostly grammatical stuff that she took care of.
Yeah, because that stuff's tough, right? Like meaning right, having the commas in the right place. Um,
Yeah,
People don't use colons or semicolons. I don't know if you have those, you know what I mean? But sometimes I read a book and like this sentence could be so long. And I'm like, how do you even know? Like, you know what I mean? How to make that like that, you know?
yeah. And my biggest issue was tense. You know, I would start out, using past tense, and then like halfway through the sentence, it'd be future or present.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I know, and that might be no offense. That might be a West Virginia thing. I notice like because I know when people text me, the way they write things is, like it'll say like they say was a lot instead of were. You know what I mean? Like meaning that it's just a
yeah,
lot of people do. I don't even know how to put it into an example, but I just noticed it's definitely a West Virginia thing because everybody that writes me, I'm like they write was instead of were in the proper thing. Not that I'm an expert by any means. It's just it seems like more of a maybe like a regional accent type of thing or something when I think because I'm not I'm from Ohio, so it's not like we talk a lot different or anything, but it is a little bit different some of the slang that people use and stuff. But yeah, so that's awesome. So I'll tell you what, let me put because I think this would be cool. Let me put up one of the pictures of the book here. Let's get this up here. Hopefully I can. There we go. So can you see that there? Hopefully.
yep. Uh-huh.
So when it
Yeah.
says a radio detective novel, what does that mean exactly?
So the main character, he decides that he wants to start his own private investigative firm,
Mhm.
and he, of course, kind of like me, listened to a lot of shows like Sherlock Holmes and Dick Tracy and The Shadow and all those. So he decided it would be an homage to those shows.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
and so let's say this too. I know it would make a lot of sense. Is this kind of based on you loosely, or just based on experiences you have, and that's kind of fed into the character?
Yeah, exactly. It's the experiences that I've had over the years, and I was like, okay, I can see the character doing this, and I was able to pull like my martial arts experience into it.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue here. I'll stop sharing this, but what is your martial arts background? Because that's where you and I have connected. So I obviously do a little. I did boxing, kickboxing, teach MMA, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is kind of the thing that I do now. But what all stuff did you do? I mean, that's how we connected, right? Being in the same martial arts background in West Virginia, same area.
Mhm.
And I think really we started kind of talking about because were you doing maybe a little bit Japanese jiu-jitsu? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. So I started out in karate back in 1999, and it was Shorin-ryu with David Eastwood. There's a picture there. Can you hold on one
Yeah.
second?
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. So yeah, started out doing Shorin-ryu back in '99. Did that for about 5 years. And of course, college kind of took over, had to focus on my education. That was a group of my high school friends. Uh, we had a little karate club there at Herbert Hoover.
Okay.
And yeah, there was like some that did Taekwondo, some that did other styles of karate. And we would all get together and just kind of mess around, spar, doing stuff like that. And that was
Well,
a
how
lot of
did they
fun.
start? Like, how did they start that karate club? And then, because is that something I've never heard of that now, right? And it doesn't mean that I hear everything that Hoover does, but is that something that they still
That
have,
was
or
something that I came up with. It's like, hey, let's do a karate club, and everybody was like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's do it. So we would meet after school. So
Well, I immediately pulled this picture. So funny thing, I was in Graffiti magazine too. Probably about the same time, I bet you. Well, yeah, actually after your early 2002, because that's when we started like the first kind of MMA gym around the Charleston area, right? That's before that was kind of going on, and you brought Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and stuff. But it reminds me, I don't even, is Graffiti still a magazine now, or?
Yes, it's they're still around. They've got a whole bunch of people there. That's because I reached out to them a couple years ago and asked them about the photos that they took. I asked them if I needed to like buy them or if I could use them for other things. And they're like, yeah, it's like the people that you dealt with years ago, they're gone. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And that's the same.
So
I think I must have ran into somebody, so I kind of knew somebody, you know what I mean? And that's, and then when you lose that contact, you just kind of lose, rather they're there. But that's kind of a cool picture. Like, were you doing anything here? Was this ad for anything, or they just kind of had some fun with some stuff, or what was going on with this picture?
well, so what had happened, they found out that I was on Maury Povich showing off some of my karate skills.
Really? Well,
And yeah,
after we'll have to go on that because I didn't know anything about that. That's really cool.
yeah. So they found out that I'd been on the show. So they like, hey, we'd like to do a little small article on you. And it ended up being like 2 pages. So and they had like all kinds of pictures. And they brought me down for a photo shoot. And it was around November. And they're like, hey, here, wear this, put this on, and just, put your green belt on. Go out there and destroy the set. And they gave me a whole bunch of stuff to play around. And it was a lot of fun that night.
Yeah. So it wasn't a Who's the Father episode of Maury Povich? Was it before that?
No, it was not. Yeah, it was little people with big talent. And so
people probably don't know that they have normal shows, or they did, right? He was like, I don't know.
Yeah,
they were still kind of controversial, but they were topics, right?
Exactly. They had regular topics, and of course, I was on there. Come to find out, there was this one girl that I was talking to, and I'd met earlier in the year. She was at the Little People of America convention that I had been to, and she was telling me that she was going to get on and play the piano. And I was like, cool. And then a little bit later, Maury Povich had seen an article written about me earlier in the year, and they're like, hey, come and join us. And I was like, oh, cool. I was like, I was just talking to somebody who's going to be on the show. And I'm like, oh. So girl calls me up and she's like, hey, it's like that, it's not going to work out. I'm not going to be on the show. And I was like, well, I'm going. So I'm going to go have some fun.
Yeah.
I get there, and I was actually supposed to fly out on 9/11, which is like kind of scary. Yeah, because they originally like, hey, you're going to fly out on a Tuesday, and then they called back a couple hours later. It's like, hey, you're going to have to fly out on that Wednesday, the 12th. I'm like, okay. So 9/11 happens. Looked at my mom. Was like, I guess I'm not going anywhere for a while. Finally, in October, they had me on the show, and I'm hanging out. I get a little nervous, and so I asked them to print off like a whole bunch of questions that I'm going to go through, because I kind of messed up earlier in the year, and I'd said some stuff in my interview with the paper, and I didn't want to repeat that, so I wanted to rehearse everything.
What did you off, but what did you mess up on? Was it something bad? Sorry to interrupt, but
I'd said something, and I quoted something from a movie, and some people took it offensively, and they kind of got a little upset with my parents. So really? I was like, well, yeah. So I was like, okay, I'll never do that again.
Yeah. How old were you here? 17? Is that what you said, or
yeah?
Did I make that up?
Well, at this point, I was like about 18 years old.
18. Okay, yeah. Wow, that's crazy. You're national TV.
A long time ago. Yeah, national TV and everything. So, I wanted to rehearse everything. So they had me out on their stage rehearsing. And this lady comes out. She's tall, blonde, wearing high heels, and she's like, Larry's like, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna teach Maury how to throw a kick. I'm like, okay. Now, when I do karate, whenever I'm teaching, I've had the serious mode. I'm in the zone, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to show her how to throw a kick, and left leg forward. You got to bend your knee. You got to straighten out your back leg, and she's doing it all wrong. I'm like getting a little aggravated. So I reach over and I grab her leg and I put her in place. And come to find out, like the camera guys in the back of the room were just laughing hysterically. And I didn't
Really?
realize it at the time. She had on like a
Yeah.
really short skirt.
Oh,
And here I am just like manhandling her leg. I'm like,
yeah. Yeah, that probably made
but
for good TV. It's all right.
so about an hour later, they had me out, and I had already reviewed all the questions that I was going to get asked. And I realized, like halfway through, the questions started changing. And that friend that I'd met, they brought her out on stage because they wanted to
Oh,
surprise me.
really?
Yeah,
Was she like a
so
surprise kind of date kind of thing?
I think that's what they were hoping for because they took us out to Hard Rock Cafe in a limo and everything. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but not just her, because everybody else that was on the show, they came with us. So
Wow.
it was fun. It was an interesting little experience. So
Well, sure. I mean, not many people, right, have had is on. Well, first of all, national TV, but let alone, I mean, Maury Povich is a pop icon, right? Right. I mean, like we kind of joked, like people really just know him now. Who's your father, kind of thing, right? But I mean, he was.
pretty much,
Yeah, and he was on A Current Affair, I think. He was married to this lady named Connie Chung, that was a big news lady at
news
the
anchor
time. I mean, they were
almost.
kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, celebrity people and everything back in the day. So I mean, that was probably in the heyday of all that stuff, which is pretty awesome, really, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
it
that's
was a fun
crazy.
little experience.
Yeah, and they found you during all that stuff. So is that like just going back to just a little bit of story where you're talking to that girl and stuff. So is that something that you did often or do still do now? Or is there like conventions that you go to, since you mentioned there was like a little people conference or something that you went to? Or
That was I'd only been to one. They had a couple regional ones here in Charleston. Shortly after that, like 2003 or 2004. It's been so long. But
yeah,
they have them every year, like the national conference.
yeah.
Now this year they didn't have it, obviously, for because of the whole COVID thing. But no, they have one like usually on like one side of the country, and then the next year it's on the other.
Oh really? So
So,
are
but
they
I've
like a
only
Florida type thing or different things?
Florida, New York, Austin, Texas, San Francisco, usually the big cities.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you said you only went once, but was it a cool experience or something that I mean, that stuff takes money, right? Like I go to a lot of conferences, but my work pays for it, so it's a little
Right.
different.
Yeah, it takes a lot of money. Yeah. And so that was like a high school graduation gift from my parents when I went.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
So yeah.
Well, so now,
But
just to kind of finish up on that, is there now? You said there is some regional stuff. So is there people locally that you talk to, like little people that you talk to, that there's something going on, or not really?
every
Because
once in a
it's
while.
not very,
Huh,
West Virginia
you
is not
cut
very
out.
big, right? So we're not talking a lot of people. Period. Of any diversity,
Right.
really. Hard. It's really hard, right?
I think there's like less than 20 people. There's like
Really.
the Little Mountaineers. Yeah. I'm on a Facebook group with the ones from West Virginia, and occasionally, we talk. They'll meet up. Now every October they'll go to the Capitol complex and they'll have like a proclamation day for dwarfism awareness. So
Well, that's awesome. So now, are you the only one in West Virginia that you know that does martial arts, or is there more than you, or like?
actually, there's another kid. Well, he was a kid when I met him. This was a long time ago. But no, there's one. He's got a black belt in karate. And then there was another guy that I knew of. He did wrestling for several
Oh, really?
years.
That's a
Yeah.
good pick now, because if you did wrestling, we talk about, like when I was in high school, we had I'm assuming he was like a paraplegic or something that was on our wrestling team. But the reason is, and this happens a lot of high school wrestling teams, they don't have a 103 pounder. They may have a different weight class now, but at the time there was like not a lot. So a lot of even wrestling teams at the time would have females on that because there wasn't a lot of boys that were that small, right? And that stopped you from getting, definitely stopped you getting from whatever you call it, like not really getting disqualified, but I guess forfeiting that match, right? So they would have somebody. So anyway, that makes a lot of sense because that would give somebody that spot too. That's a hard spot to fill. That's why I think maybe they might have changed the weight class. I don't know really because I've been out of that. I'm old. I don't have kids that wrestle, so I don't know the weight class now. You know.
Yeah, I
But
never really
I feel
followed wrestling when I was, yeah. So
yeah. So okay, well that's awesome though. Like, so how hard is it? Was there any kind of modifications that you had to do for karate or any of the other stuff? I mean, is any are things pretty much basically the same?
well, when it came to me, when it came to sparring, they my classmates, they would get down on their knees and we'd work, techniques, and then eventually they would stand up and they would attack me like, a regular person would if they were mad or something. Try to
Yeah.
make it as real life as possible. And in jiu-jitsu, the instructor, he would start off, try to be equal as, on his knees, work with me, and then they would, stand up and try the same thing, try to attack me, and I would try to defend myself.
Yeah.
So he would modify a lot of the moves for me, so that way I could get the most out of it.
Yeah. What's awesome. So let me find a couple more pictures here to go since we kind of got started talking and I got off the little timeline that I wanted to share here. But um let's look at this next one here. So there's your book again, your book. Let's see, how about that picture? That one looks, I don't know what that one is.
Yeah, that is Sensei Dave Eastwood. That was his 50th anniversary of or practicing and teaching martial arts. That was a couple of years ago. He was my first instructor. Interesting stories. Like I walked in, and I used to walk with a walker. I've had a lot of back operations. Had a lot of hip and knee issues, and so I'm in high school. I'm walking with a walker, and I walk in, and I was like, I want to do karate. And he's like, okay. So he puts me with the black belt, and he's like, go over there, work out with this guy. And he told me this later on. His intention was to wear me out, and I would never come back.
Really? Well, that's nice.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
I know what you're saying.
yeah. And so, of course, the next class I came back and his mouth dropped open. And he's like, oh my gosh, this guy means business. So
Yeah.
he had to relearn and try to figure out ways to teach me. And he went to his instructors and talked to them. I was like, what's the best way to go about it? So their thought was, I would learn as much as I can. I would learn all the teaching points because there was nothing wrong up here. I could relay it. I could teach those techniques, and I could cover all the teaching points with it. I may not be able to do it right, or maybe I may not be able to do it correctly, or the way you would do it, but I could still
Yeah.
teach it.
Well, it all makes sense. So, I mean, honestly, it probably made him a better person too, right? Because he had to go and learn
It,
something different, right? Yeah. And so, did he
yeah,
relay that to you? Thankful.
yeah. It was like several months down the road. He pulled me off to the side, and he's like, "Hey, I want to talk to you." He's like, "I want to thank you." He's like, "Because you really pulled me out of my little box, and you made me rethink how I had to go about doing stuff." And I was like,
Yeah. Well, he
cool.
sounds like a really good person. No, for real. That
Yeah,
yeah, that
he
sounds
was
like a really
really,
good person not just because of that. But to be honest, what it is a lot of people are just scared because they don't know what to do, right? And so the easiest way when you don't know what to do is just to kind of maybe do like you said, is trying to run you off, and then he didn't have to deal with it, right? And that's not making fun of
exactly.
him or saying bad. It's just what happens, right? I've been in the same situation, meaning that I've had people come in. I primarily teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I've had people come in a wheelchair, right? And so then all of a sudden now, there goes half the moves because you can't do if they can't use their legs, they can't do a lot of the chokes that we do, or a lot, what I mean? I'm like, oh shoot, what am I going to do here? But you have to embrace the challenge, right, and figure it out. And the other thing is that it means a lot to both of us, right? Meaning that, if you came to my gym too, it'd be the same. Like, it means a lot to me that you would trust me to try to figure stuff out, and vice versa, that that you would come and you pick the certain place, and that you're going to try hard and you're going to do certain things, right? It's like, it's hard. We all go through the same thing. Like, it doesn't matter. Even just people coming in too, sometimes just overweight or something. It doesn't even have to be anything crazy, right? And then they can only last 10 seconds. They can't breathe. And we got to figure something out. But it ultimately makes us all a better person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome. He sounds like a really good guy. So let's go through here to another one. So I want to make sure we cover all your training stuff here before we kind of move on. So let's see this next one here. It's a Happy New Year picture. We can skip that one. What is it? So this is where you got your black belt, right?
Yeah. Last year, back in June, I got promoted to black belt. And cool thing was Eastwood, he was actually there at that class when I got promoted. So that was kind of it was kind of, like a little sentimental thing. He's like, like, you started out with me, I wanted to see you, get promoted. So that was kind of cool.
Now, how long did that journey take?
Never let me do the full man shoot. Shoot, about 20 years.
20 years.
Because,
Is that because it was on and
life
off?
happened.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, on and off. Yeah, so back in 2009, 2010, I'd gotten my second degree brown belt and went on vacation. And then, of course, I found out while I was on vacation, the class that I was going to had to shut down. So, yeah, and it was like 2-3 weeks before, the next belt test. So, yeah. Then after that, I was like, well, you know what?
Keep going. So we're on Zoom, just so people. It's hard when I talk. It cuts you off, and vice versa. So sometimes it's hard. So you're doing fine. If that happens again, just keep talking. But I was gonna say what happens is in martial arts that people don't do martial arts don't realize is, look, martial arts is hard in general, but what is really hard is the consistency factor, meaning that you might get hurt, you might get married, you might get divorced, you might get a new, on and on and on. That the gym might shut down, or life changes, right? People change jobs, they don't have money, it's like, so that's one thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that, because on average it takes, if you go every day, it takes 10 years to get black belt, right? But that's like, it could be less, right? If you went every day and you had a lot of money. But it's mostly why there's not a lot of black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is because 10 years is a lot of time for somebody to be in one place and not move and not deal with the drama and not get hurt. And because how many people I lose that get a new relationship or get divorced or something, in their life, just they feel depressed and then they just move on. It's just it's a different thing. So anyway, that the journey is hard, right? Martial arts is hard, but the journey is hard. It just is hard.
Exactly. Yeah, and so shortly after the dojo shut down, I was itching to do something different. And a buddy of mine came to me. He's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go try out this jiu-jitsu class. It's up in Clendenin." And I'm like, "All right." So I went with him. Honestly, I didn't think I could do it because when I got there, the instructor was like, "Hey, there's some judo involved," and I know judo is throwing people around. And I was like, man, I don't know if I could throw anybody around. And he's like, oh, you can, trust me. It's like, okay. So he showed me how to take people off balance and how to throw them. And by the end of the night, I was throwing people left and right. I was having a lot of fun.
That is awesome too, because it is tough, right? Because you've got to, I've done a little judo too, obviously, and you got to fit in the hips. There's a certain way to catch the balance, right? To be able to throw them. And it's very technical, very, very technical.
Yeah, it was like, there was this one guy, it was like about 6'2", and I would grab a hold of his hands and I would just put him in a wrist lock and he would go flying off to the side of the room. So
That's
that was
awesome.
a lot of fun.
So did you really, did that change? Like, so when you did the judo / jiu-jitsu type stuff, what changed there? Did you just want to add that to your karate, or did you want to change things, or what were you thinking at that point? Just adding something?
Yeah, adding something, do something different. Just kind of open, be open to the horizon.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. It gave me a different perspective,
Yeah.
and of course, it gave me a little bit extra to work with. So,
Well, and now how long did you do that for?
ooh, about 3 years, give or take a few. I got all the way up to purple belt,
Yeah, what's up?
and then shortly after that, ended up, just not quitting, but life again, had to take care of stuff around the house and with the family. We were getting sick, and I came down with a really severe case of sleep apnea.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so that I mean, my health like started declining like really, really bad.
Oh, yeah. So
So
did you get that taken? So are you on like a CPAP machine now? So
yeah, I got a BiPAP,
you got a real
and
bad
man,
BiPAP's the first one, right?
yeah, yeah, and I'm like on the highest pressure that they, it's maxed
Yeah.
out. So that's how bad I
So
was.
were you like that your whole life then,
So,
I assume, right? And just undiagnosed?
yeah, pretty much. So I walked into the doctor's office. It was a consultation, and he looked at me. He's like, "Oh, you definitely have sleep apnea." It's like,
Yeah.
"How do you know?" And he's like, "Because I can look at you." He's like, "You're a dwarf. You have scoliosis, and that right there, you have sleep apnea." It's like,
Yeah.
whatever. And so I'll do the test, but I don't want no
Yeah.
machine. And so I did the test, and that what the night that I was there, they told me like normally we don't treat anybody, so we're just going to do the test, and then you'll go home, and then we'll
Yeah.
call you later. I'm like, okay. Halfway through the night, they come barging into the room with a mask and all the equipment to put me on it. Like you're like having really
Yeah.
big issues. We've got to put this on you, and I'm like really
Yes. Yeah.
groggy. And so like they start reaching to me. Now, when I was a kid, I had a lot of operations, so the mask that they put you
Mhm.
to sleep with scares me. I get PTSD over it. And so he went to put a mask on me, and my fight or flight kicked in. So I started fighting. I started going for the wrist locks. At least I thought I was.
It's crazy.
my wife, she was there. She's like, "No, you weren't doing anything. You were just."
Just, yeah. Well, that's, yeah, man. Sleep apnea is rough, man. It's and so I'm similar. I don't have a BiPAP, so I'm not as bad as you. But the same thing. Ever since I was a little kid, I would sleep over at my friends' houses, and then their parents would tell my parents, they'd be like, your son sounds like he's dead all the time. Like sounds like he's not breathing, and that's before people really even knew what sleep apnea was. So they would say that to my parents. My parents would just be like, "Well, he's fine. He always lives." I mean, there's
Yeah.
yeah,
Did you die?
exactly. So we just kind of like moved on, and I never even thought about it. And then I didn't really even remember that until later. I just knew. I think I married my wife, and I think she was like freaked out, like you quit breathing all the time, and she convinced me to go get the test done and stuff. But I'll be honest with you, so I don't wear that machine at all. So I still have sleep apnea. It's not treated. So, and that was probably, hell, man, that was probably in 2009 or so, about that time. And I haven't done anything since, which is a bummer. I need to. We talk about it all the time. I'm like, well, I'm going to bring that out. I'm going to try to use it because I just can't get used to it. I just can't. I wake up and somewhere during the night, I rip it off. And, I mean, it's just,
Well, that night they put the mask on me, and I got like 2, maybe 3 hours of sleep, and that was like the best sleep I had had in such a long
really,
time. Yeah, it's like I woke up feeling refreshed. I mean, I was ready to go. I was ready to take on the
yeah,
world. Like my color had come back, and I was like, I felt so great. I couldn't wait to get the BiPAP machine. I couldn't wait for them to send it to me so that way I could start sleeping with it. And it made a world of difference.
yeah.
Didn't wake up with a headache, and I was actually sleeping through the night. I wasn't getting up 4 times a night to go use the bathroom. To which my wife looked at me when we first got married. She's like, "That's not normal. You need to get that checked."
Really.
It's like I drink a lot of soda.
Yeah, seems like kind of weird, huh? Well, so was it
Yeah.
hard for you to get
So,
used
but
to, or not really? You just kind of adapted right away.
Do what?
Was it hard to get used to, or
Yeah. No, not at all. It's like I found a mask that didn't look like the ones that they put you to sleep with.
yeah,
So it's like the Philips Dreamwear, it kind of just a little nasal pillow comes underneath. And so using that one, I didn't get as anxious and I didn't get as, scared.
okay.
So, and I was able to sleep through the night and I would actually wake up early and I was ready to go.
Yeah,
I felt better. Started losing weight
yeah.
because I'd gained a lot. I was all the way up to 118 pounds. For somebody who's 3 feet tall, that's not
Probably
good.
pretty big. Yeah, I can't visualize it. Probably pretty
Yeah.
big. Yeah, because I mean that's like half of what I weigh, right? And I'm half of my
Yeah.
height too. So, yeah, that's kind of crazy, man. Well, I mean, that gives me hope in a weird way because it's to say, like, at some point, I've got it. All this has got to like motivate me at some point. I don't want it to be like, well, I almost died, and so I finally need to wear it or something.
Yeah, they looked at me and the doctors, the respiratory therapist, and they're like, "Are you aware that your oxygen levels dropped all the way down to 20%?"
Yeah, wow.
It's like, no. Are you aware that you had like over 200 instances of apnea in a matter of 2 hours?
Yeah,
No. He's like, well, it's like you're pretty bad. It's like it's not a question of if, it was a question of when you were going to
yeah.
die. Like,
Well, and that's the thing that people don't really. I mean, it affects your blood pressure, just like you said, your weight. Literally, sleep is the most important thing. And I guess I know all this. So that's what's funny is that I know all this and I still don't do anything right. Like I will die. Anybody that has untreated sleep apnea, you're gonna die of some complication. Like my everything has to work harder for me, right? Because I literally for people that don't know, when you have sleep apnea, you literally mine's neurological. It's not like I don't have a fat neck. A lot of times people have overweight and they kind of do it, or
yeah. So one of my doctors, he kept saying, I kept suspecting I may have sleep apnea. He's like, you don't qualify. It's like you don't have, all that
yeah,
weight like, a bigger person would. And I was like, okay, whatever. And finally it got to the point where I was falling asleep at work. I was in the middle of a meeting with some directors and people like that. And here I am just kind of,
yeah,
and I'm taking a pin and trying to stab my leg so that way I can get like an adrenaline to come back through and just wake me
yeah,
up. And I started snoring in the middle of the meeting. My boss got mad.
yeah. I imagine.
So yeah, so I went to the doctor and I was like, look, it's like if you don't do something, I'm gonna go get an 8 ball of cocaine and I'm gonna start
Just
killing you because I gotta stay
yeah.
awake. And he's like, don't do that. Just don't.
Yeah, well, that's like a on the problem. Yeah, no, but it makes it so like honestly. I mean, this may help some people. I mean, it may help me, man, because like I said, I've been putting it off and putting it off, and but if you don't, you will not only you're gonna have health problems. Let's say that even the dying thing, people that don't believe that you're gonna be like. I'm the same way. Like it's very hard for me. Like that's what I try to tell people all the time when I talk to them. It's like it takes a lot of effort for me because they'll say, for example, like you're really busy, you do all this stuff, and I'm like, well, I could do like a 10 times more, but I literally have to fight all day to like be active. Like my brain just tells me just to go sit down all day because I'm tired. So therefore, which is another reason it's unhealthy. I'm taking Red Bull 5 Hour Energy, I'm dosing up and all that stuff's not good for you either, right?
Exactly. I was doing that. Red Bull, I drink copious amounts of coffee. Now I drink it because I like the taste
Yeah,
of it and not just to try to stay awake. But I was doing anything that I could just to stay awake. I was shoving food in my mouth just so that way it's like, well, I can't sleep if I'm chewing something.
that's so funny you say that, 'cause
And
I did the same thing. Driving's the worst for me. So when I drive, then I got in a bad habit because you're right. It sounds stupid for somebody who doesn't know, but when you literally are
yeah,
driving, you can't keep your head from nodding off and can't, fall asleep. Just like you said, if you're eating, your brain stays awake more. So then I'd just be snacking on stuff, which then obviously you're getting fat. I mean, it's such a
exactly.
weird disease, right?
It is. I'd get in the car and we'd be going, just a mile down the road and I'd fall asleep as soon as the car door shut.
Yeah.
I wasn't driving, so
Yeah, no, I got.
but it got really bad.
Yeah, well, that's good that you got taken. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I do actually like talking to people that have treated it, because all these things help me. You know what I mean? Like, ultimately, I know what I got to do. I have the machine. I don't have a new one, right? I know they're a lot better now. They're a lot quieter and stuff. But like, I just if I
They are.
before I go and buy, because I had bought the one that I did, I was younger. I just need to get on that one first, and then when I'm able to use it, hopefully, then I will buy a new one or something. Or I here's the other thing people don't understand: those tests are horrible. Like, you go in, there's nothing horrible about it, but when you do a sleep study test, you go into a lab, which is uncomfortable at all. There's a bed in a room.
Yes.
There's cameras everywhere. There's
Mhm.
typically a couple people that sit there and watch you sleep. But they hook a billion wires to your head, right? It's just awkward, right? Because they put this weird gel on them because it's got to stick to your hair. And then you already
Yep.
don't sleep
Mhm.
anyway. And they're like, hey, now go to sleep. We're going to watch you. So it's like really hard to sleep, right? It's awful. I mean,
Yeah.
awful.
Luckily, I fell asleep. It's like I laid down and I was out, and then like next thing I know, it's like they're pounding on the door coming in. I was like, whoa.
Well,
So,
yeah, mine it was fine. It was rough. I just meant, like, I've had a couple just because I was trying to get it done. But the first one was the worst because you're apprehensive. It's kind of weird. And I remember I knew I
yeah.
was like, well, how am I going to go to sleep? So I took, somebody had some bunch of sleeping pills or something. I took them, and I had never taken sleeping pills. So I was sitting in the chair while they're hooking the stuff up to me. And the guy was cool. He's like a younger guy, but I just started sweating because I guess it was making me sick to my stomach. And I was like, man, you got to hurry up. And he's like, why? And I said, man, I'm going to throw up. You need to go. I need to go lay down. It's like, hurry up and get these fucking things on my head. I was like yelling at him, and he was like, well, what? Like, what's going on? I said, I'll just be honest with you, man. I took some sleeping pills because I knew I would be asleep. And he's like, man, you can't do that for this test. Like, I said, we were supposed to really cancel it. I was like, don't cancel it because I'm never going to come back. I was like, you need to get this done. And like, so they were pretty cool because he obviously did the test and we got through it. But the part that I say pretty cool, because he was also weird. Like, I mean, we're having a good time, we're talking, but he was like, hey, you see that girl over there? And I was like, sure. And he's like, yeah, when you fall asleep, me and her are gonna be having sex. And I'm like, well, that's odd. He's like, yeah, we don't have nothing else to do. So we just bang while you were sleeping. And I'm like, so that's running through my head too. I'm like, this whole place is just weird. And so anyway, I mean, without the sleeping pills, I probably wouldn't have been able to sleep. But the same anyway, I got through it. I don't think it affected anything negatively because it was the same as yours. They came in, same thing. They gave me the same speech. They're like, normally you're gonna sleep, we'll wake you up tomorrow. And they came in the middle of the night, same thing. They're like, hey man, you got to put this on. This is bad. So yours is worse because a BiPAP means it's been a while, but that's like it's forcing air in and out. That's why they call it's the dual. Mine is the CPAP is just it's forcing air in, because what happens for people that don't know is typically your soft palate or your tongue like closes off your airway. That's why a lot of people that have a big neck have a problem, because all that tissue kind of closes off their airway. And but that air forces through. On a CPAP, it forces through and kind of keeps that airway open. And normally it only has to go one direction, but yours goes both directions, which means it's like constantly going. So which again means it's pretty bad. There's not too many people I know that have a BiPAP actually. So that's pretty rough. So I'd imagine you feel a lot better.
Oh yeah, I do. And there have been
Yeah.
times I've taken naps and I've taken it without it. And I was like, I'll wake up. I was like, no, I was like, I just don't feel as good. So I make sure I wear it every night.
Yeah, and
And
that's the other thing. I try to explain to people I could sleep 8 hours and wake up and feel horrible because it's the quality of sleep and you have no control over it. I could also sleep for an hour, and it just so happens maybe that's a lot better than the 8 hours. Like sometimes I wake up and I feel great, just so
yeah,
luck of the draw kind of deal.
yeah. And there's been times where the electric's gone off and we'll go and stay at a hotel just so that way I have electricity so that way I can, sleep. I
Yeah,
recently bought a battery backup.
yeah. So I was going to ask you because that's a good point because I've never really thought about that. And, I talked to some people. This is kind of unrelated, but kind of related to sleep. But they have like a sleep number bed, and then when the power goes off, they can't really do whatever the hell they do, right? So yeah, it definitely would suck, huh? Well,
Yeah.
well, okay. Well, we're probably boring the crap out of each other, or not each other, but everybody else, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah, so let's get off that. But so when we stopped there, you had just started judo and jiu-jitsu, right? So
Uh-huh.
let me move on here. Find I'm terrible at using this thing. Find another thing here where you're doing some stuff. So there we go. So this is you here with a knife.
Yes.
So this is recent?
Within the last 2 years. So I started training with Ernie Boggs, and he's been teaching me defensive blade. So we had a couple of prototypes done up. That's actually one of my favorites. Of course, I don't have good retention, so we got a D guard on that, and it helps me hold the blade. But
So who made that prototype for you? Was it somebody locally or
yeah, some of the guys that I was training with, they had like a whole bunch of acrylic that they had access to. So he just, cut it out and he brought it to class one day. He's like, here, try this. The original one that I had was made out of metal. And so training with it, it was probably a good pound. And of course, I would, hit them in the elbow or the knee or the shin. And of course, there's a lot of explicitives, traded back and forth. So they decided, here, we're going to try this plastic, version, which made class more fun.
Yeah, well, that's nice. So, well, here, and what I was thinking, I'm actually writing this down, but I'll just tell you now. But so I was also looking at your shirt there. So is that kind of your brand now, the Karate Kicking Dwarf, or?
Yes. So Karate Kicking Dwarf, it was just right about the time that I was going through like college, undergrad and graduate school, and I'd done a lot of writing. I'd really gotten better with grammar, and I'd gotten better with my writing skills. So I wanted to do something a little bit different. When I was a kid, I did a lot of web design. So I wanted to go another route and actually try to produce content. And I decided I would write about my experiences in doing karate. So I needed something that was kind of catchy. So I came up with Karate Kicking Dwarf, and not just some little guy who does karate. So
yeah, well, I bet Maury Povich would have liked that one. That'd have been a good one.
Yeah, it would have been. And so, yeah. And so, of course, I have a graphic design background, and I played around and created my own little patch and things like that. So,
well, so yeah, and that's a good point too, because I remember I've obviously, again, you and I are friends, and I've seen you post that. So where can somebody get one of those patches or one of the T-shirts from you?
T-shirts, they are on Teespring. I've had a couple links in the on my Facebook page, so you can go there, Karate Kicking Dwarf Facebook. And of course, I'd have to get some more patches made, but if anybody wants one, just let me know. It's like I'll send you the link and you can purchase it, or if you want any patches, I'll go get some more made.
Yeah, well, I definitely want one. I think I told you before, but I have the same thing. I have a tendency. I was like, hey, I want one, then I don't follow through. So it's nothing like personal. It's like I'm like, hey, I want one, and then I go on, and I'm just like a dumb kid. I'm like, oh, shiny object. I'm on to something else.
Yeah, exactly. I've done it too.
Yeah, no, and it made me, as soon as we started talking about it, I was like, I remember exactly writing a post saying like, hey, save one for me, and then I just probably disappeared on you or something. So no, I think it'd be awesome, because it's important, I think, for all of us to, especially in West Virginia, to support each other, right? I think it's important. We all got stuff going on. We all got stuff that we care about. But that's how we grow and how we make each other better, is by supporting each other. And it's kind of the point of this, right? It's the same thing. It's like, it's to kind of help, obviously, some kind of audience that maybe not know you, but it's to help you grow, and the vice versa. Somebody might listen, like your fans listen to this and be like, hey, they might learn something different on my side too. So it's important for us to support each other.
Exactly.
And so let me go ahead and let's do this too. So obviously we went to that prototypes where you kind of left off there, but let's kind of pop this up here. There's another. So is that the same knife or different knife there? Or,
that went in. Yeah, that one right there. It was one of the first prototypes. It didn't have a D guard. Somebody suggested taking a rubber band to help kind of keep it up against my hand
Okay.
so I wouldn't lose it.
Yeah, I see that now.
Yeah, and that one's made of metal. So of course, Ernie, he took a lot of abuse. So
Yeah,
because
that's
I would
rough.
go and hit him, and yeah, so that was one of the
Yeah.
originals.
What's on?
Now,
So here's the picture.
now with this program that he kind of came up with, he incorporated a lot of small circle jujitsu,
Uh-huh.
and that is my personal favorite. So if I get a hold of you, chances are I'm going to go for your wrist, or I'm going to go for your ankle or something, and I'm going to lock you up in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, good. So this is your old green belt days. We're kind of out of order
That was
here.
I was a green belt in jujitsu there, and this girl that I was fighting or sparring with, she had kicked me, and I just fell. So, and my wife, she took a picture of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, well, I
Wait,
need to.
so this reminds randomly. So this reminds me while I'm thinking of that. Do you know? Hopefully, she don't get mad if I say her name on here, but I think her name was Kimber Skiles. Is that her last name? She'd probably get married, but Kimber was her first name for sure. But she took karate or jujitsu with you because I know because she ended up taking something with me, maybe jujitsu at some point. But anyway, she brought it up with you, I think. So if you don't remember her name, it's no big deal. Because we all meet a million people, right? And when people ask me stuff,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, I no, yeah. I just only reason I think because Kimber's a weird name to me. I don't know many. She's the only one I ever knew. So, I don't mean that's weird, Kimber. If you're listening to this, I think you're fine. I just it's a name that sticks out. So, yeah. All right. Well, yeah.
The
So no
only
worries. And
Kimber.
then, yeah. So this one, are you a
Yeah.
white belt? Is it really old?
Yeah, this is when I first started out. I was a white belt, and there's the 6'2", 6'3" tall guy that I would throw around. And of course, that particular class, I'd learned Murray Tagari, the double leg takedown, and that was
Ah,
one of my favorites.
well, and for somebody that does jujitsu and wrestling, all that stuff too. I mean, you do have advantages, right? Because like for example, I'm 6'6" roughly, and I have a hard time for me taking people down because I'm slow at getting into the crouch and getting there. So my typical style is I let people shoot on me and I just sprawl on them and use my fat body just to kind of squish them. That's what I'm hoping. But that being said, what I really mean by that too is that anybody that's shorter than me, it's a problem because I can't, like usually whoever's lowest kind of wins is kind of basically
Yeah.
right. So if you're lower, like you got an advantage.
Hmm. And one thing I really love about jujitsu is like, because people are mostly taller than me, if I can get them on the ground, and if I'm on the ground with them, then we're both equal. And
Yes,
so all I got
exactly.
to do is just lock you up, keep you down, and get you to tap out.
Yeah, exactly. No, so that was when I trained with Hoist Gracie, early 2000s. But that's one of the things he said. I remember in an interview, he actually for a local station here in West Virginia, he did an interview, and I just remember that to this day. He's like, you take me and a sumo wrestler, and he's like, you put us on the ground. Now he's not, 600 pounds anymore. We're equal. Or I think he also made it because jujitsu always got that thing. It's like I am whatever it is. I'm a shark in an ocean. But he's also talking about putting him in water, which also makes sense because we also know in jujitsu if that 600 pounder gets on top of you while you're on the ground, he's still 600 pounds and it still sucks, right? So
Yeah.
it's a little bit better, but it's they're still 600 pounds,
Yeah.
But you're right. It gives you a better, I think, technique. That is the cool thing, and that's why I love jiu-jitsu too. It is cool for me that I am big guy, but I love the technical aspect. So when I roll with people, in general, especially if it's not a competition or anything serious, I try to roll like they do. If I rolled with you or somebody that's 130 pounds or whatever, I try to roll like that and not just put 240 pounds on them and try to squish them. It doesn't help either one of us, right? It doesn't make sense. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So have you continued with any jujitsu or judo, and or are you kind of
Uh,
more now?
well, I like the blade aspect. I've been doing that for the last couple of years. I would love to roll with somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, the class that I was going to, I don't think they're doing jujitsu anymore. So, and I just haven't made it down to Charleston to come to your class yet. So,
Yeah,
and
what
I
time? You're always
know,
welcome.
yeah, and I know with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I like doing small circle. I like doing the
Yeah.
wrist locks and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt you.
No, you're
So
good. So we
come
we
down there.
joke with I'm sure you see memes, and because I that's my online. I just post stupid stuff all day to try not be so serious, right? Which is not to get off on a tangent, but that's all you see is like these political posts, whether you're on one side or the other, and it's just. And then if somebody thinks you write a political post, even like sometimes I'm just writing a joke and somebody's happens to be in it, and then people get offended. I'm like, it's just like I don't care. It's just a joke, right? But the point is, a lot of times when we write goofy stuff about leg locks or wrist locks, right? We'll say, "Oh, you just wrist locked me. That's prison rules, bitch." So now we're gonna, stuff like that. So, yeah, no, you're fine. If any of that stuff you ever want to do, you're fine. I have a background with small circuit jiu-jitsu a little bit, like so. I'm like whatever I am, 7th or 8th degree in Japanese jiu-jitsu. I'd probably higher. I don't even know what it does. Like they're so different, right? Like when I was a black belt in Japanese jiu-jitsu, and it was so long ago. It was probably in the 90s, But then that's when I started taking Brazilian jiu-jitsu, probably late night, like 98. And it's like I had to start all. They're just different, right? They're two different things.
Mhm.
But they're still applicable in both, right? Meaning that you see the same things. I know people try to separate them a little bit, but I think the difference between the two, if I was going to say what's the difference in Japanese jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, is that a lot of times Japanese jiu-jitsu, they just make it a lot simpler. Like here's an arm bar, here's a thing. And then in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, we're like, well, there's the arm bar. But if this guy does this, here's another version. And if he does this, here's another version. And then we can go on forever, right? And I think that's what Japanese
Right.
jiu-jitsu doesn't do. In general, they just say, here's an Osoto Garrett to an arm bar and blah, blah, blah. Kind of what I've noticed. I do them both. I don't, I still don't know. Every time somebody asks me that question, I'm like, I don't know.
The one thing that I do like about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, just observing, there's a lot of handicapped people that I've met over the years that do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it's very adaptable. They
Yeah.
make it work
Yeah.
for them. So, and that's a
Yeah.
definite appreciation that I have for it.
Yeah. I was at a tournament. Again, that might have been 98-ish. It was to that you'll find this the more that you talk with me. I heard a good quote the other day, by the way, thinking of this is, somebody said like when you get older, right? I don't feel any different, but what my frame of reference gets longer, meaning that when I was 15, I would say that's the other day. And it literally was the other day. Now that I'm 40, I say it's the other day, and it might have been 15 or 20 years ago. So my frame of reference has got. So that's why it's so hard to remember dates. But anyway, I was at a tournament in the early 2000s, late 90s with that Kyle Maynard, I think is his name is. And I think he has no arms or legs. Have you ever heard anything about him?
He sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he got real famous because he was, I think, maybe in a pretty good college, and he might have been a Division I wrestler. I could be saying, but he wrestled nonetheless in college. And did some pretty big things. And he also then ended up doing jujitsu. The guy's done a million things, to be honest with you. He probably climbed some mountains and stuff, wrote a bunch of books, one of those kind of guys. But you're exactly right. There's a ton of guys that maybe have like, an amputee of some kind or paralyzed, or just in Kyle's case, literally had no, it kind of like stumps for arms that stopped at his elbows. And I think he was born that way. But he was able to adapt, and he was badass at jiu-jitsu because that's the other, like he had definite limitations where we had that wrestling background. He also had some advantages because you can't armbar him, right? He had no full arm, and you couldn't leg lock him, and you could choke him, but he was just, he knew that's the thing you could do, so he just stayed away from it, and it was pretty awesome, And then I think he beat a lot of people on points. He was able to take people down and do fairly well, which is awesome. So. But you're right. So, this too, we've talked over years. You're welcome anytime you come to the gym. And obviously you could teach me stuff as well too. I don't know a ton of stuff on weapons. That's not my forte, right? Like I teach some self-defense thing. I know some really basic things, but that's not my forte. I usually say if somebody attacks me with a knife or a gun, just run away. It's kind of my self-defense, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a good, general. Because I remember even Hoist Gracie said years ago was he same thing. He knows some basic knife defenses, right? And then somebody came kind of like the way that you would hold a knife because you guys do a little bit more knife stuff. And then he said, well, what happens if somebody, and the way that guy was holding the knife, normally somebody would hold a knife like this, right? And they try to stab you but a knife fighter will hold the knife like this. And then they were like, what do you do if the guy does that? And he just said, I run away. Like, I'm not going to fight that guy. I'm not going to win, So, and I kind of took that, right or wrong. I just was like, yeah, that's, if that happens to me, I shouldn't be
there. Exactly. And it's a good philosophy to have. And with me, I can't run fast. So I'm going to have to stand my ground and, hope for the best.
Well, no, and I mean, if I'm just thinking outside of the box as a martial artist, I would think knife sounds great for you, right? Because like you said, you can't run fast. You got some stuff now. You got this weapon, which is an added thing for it. It sounds great.
The picture, the big one that I'm holding, I call that one the equalizer. Because Professor Boggs, he pointed out, he's like, with that in your hands, like you've equalized, like with your opponent, like the attackers, like you've got a bigger blade. They come at you, you can reach out and you can get them. So
yeah. So now, do you carry a knife with you now? After that?
Not at the moment. I'm still working on getting a real version of that made.
You should just say yes, so that way people think if they attack you, just kill them.
Yes, I carry one. I also carry a couple of guns, and and I got a Doberman that stays with me.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, no, and then because people ask at the gym, if I'm teaching a self-defense seminar, especially for women, so this is right. I was going to say two things here, but they always say, like, what about a gun, right? And I said, well, I think you should have one, 100%. Just because I'm showing you ways to get out if somebody grabs you or chokes you, or that doesn't mean that you can't use your gun to do all these same things. But, and this is the second part, kind of why I paused. The other part that often happens in these seminars is I'm like, well, where do you carry your gun? And most people put it in their purse or whatever. And I said, well, here's the thing. If I attack you, it's usually by surprise, and you're probably not going to be able to get to your purse. Like you may at some point, but I also might be trying to take your purse, right? There's a lot of aspects that people don't think about. So we do cover that a little bit, but that's not the point of me saying this. Is there's a lot involved. That's kind of why if you do have a gun, you don't just put a gun in your purse or whatever and then never use it. You got to be able to draw it and have it in a place where it's readily available, just like your knife. If your knife's stuck in a super tight pocket that's hard to get out, it's not gonna really help you either, right?
It's pointless.
Yeah. So what is the best thing that you've learned with the knife? Again, since I don't have a really good background in that, what is your favorite part, or what's the best thing that you've learned there?
The places that would really mess up a person if I were to get a hold of them. Yeah. Especially around the legs, the femoral artery.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. There's a lot of cutting arteries, right? The times that I've messed with people with knives, they were like, yeah, I'm gonna hit your femoral artery, your popliteal artery, your radial artery, I don't even know if there's a radial artery, but probably is, stuff like that, right? So just making stuff up at some point. So it's good, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was part of a seminar. I was with the Public Safety Expo years ago, and Ernie Boggs was there, and his whole crew, and I was among a whole bunch of law enforcement officers, and just be able to be a part of that. They showed me all the places that would really mess a person up, and basically they wouldn't be walking away, because for me, I'd be going after the knee, that inside, and
Yeah, no, and it's important because I think people that don't do martial arts or don't mess with knives, that's what they think. They think I'm going to stab you, but you stab me in my fat stomach, and it's going to hurt. But most people I know that get stabbed in fights, and I've known quite a few. I guess I hang out with a lot of unsavory characters, but they typically don't even know they got stabbed. They feel something hot, maybe something sharp. They keep fighting, and then later they find out they've gotten stabbed a couple times. which is the typical thing. You're fighting that's what I was saying earlier with the hoist thing, is that you're fighting like a guy that just picked up a knife. He's not a knife fighter. So that's the difference. What I would consider you as a trained, even at the basic level, you're a knife fighter, because now you're aiming for things that are going to maybe kill this person or definitely stop the fight. Like if you cut, first of all, we just talk about these arteries. If you cut somebody's arteries, they're almost always going to die by so many times to get there. I mean, that's not trying to be dramatic, right? Like if you cut an artery, it's going to squirt 3 foot of blood. I mean, that's what I work in a hospital, you know what I mean? It's not good. So is that kind of your game? Like are you, you know, for lack of a better term, have you learned to basically just fillet somebody?
I've learned how to do that, yes. And of course, but one of the other things I focus on is disarming.
Yeah.
If somebody were to come at me with, you know, like a baseball bat or a knife or anything like that, how to get that out of their hands and diffuse the situation.
No, and that stuff's good too. That's awesome, right? Because and then typically you probably have a lot better, like again, knife defenses and stuff than I do, right? Because the things that I concentrate on for me, because I basically do jujitsu and some other stuff, and we don't do that. It's just so your basic underhand stab, your overhand stab, you know, your basic type of stuff. I'm sure you guys gonna went over some of the more complicated stuff, which is awesome. I mean, and it's a beautiful art. It's another one. It is like when we're talking about it right now. Sounds pretty gruesome, and it is pretty gruesome, and that's it should be treated with respect. If you get in a knife fight, the first thing they tell you is you're going to be cut or stabbed, right? The very first, like if it's part of the knife fight, right?
Yeah.
So exactly. have you fallen in love with that now, or is it just something that you're adding to your martial arts background?
It's just something I'm adding to my martial arts background. I mean, I've got, you know, the stand up, you know, striking, I've got the ground, and now I've got a weapon. So I've covered like 3 areas of martial arts that help me keep me well rounded.
No, what have you added all of these things to your book, to your character in the book?
Yes. So the main character, he actually carries around blades, and he's good. He's really good with, you know, his ground game and things like that. Because there's like a scene where this bad guy, he jumps up on top and holds a knife to his throat, and he has to get out of it.
So how do you write, you know, getting back to the book now, I guess, since we're doing that, how do you write a really technical scene, like, and to make that make sense to somebody that's just your average person? Meaning, like, if you're writing like, hey, you know, this guy's got a knife to his throat, and then you're trying to describe the move or the maneuver to get out, is that very difficult to describe?
Well, it kind of is. So I sit there and I'll kind of meditate, and I'll just replay the moves that had been done to me. And I'll just, you know, go through one, you know, move at a time. And I would write each step down. And then afterwards, I would just kind of bring it all together in a nice little couple paragraphs. So, and it's actually kind of why I started writing, because I would go and do all this training, and I would get home and I'd be so hyped, and I'd be like, yeah, that was so fun. And so I just started writing.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to make sure I didn't forget that. And it's kind of how it all started.
So for us jiu-jitsu guys, does your guy end with any cool submissions ever?
Don't think I've done a cool submission in the story yet. Yes. Yeah.
just lie whenever possible. We got to sell the book, right?
Exactly. Please.
Yeah, so you did some flying arm bars and some other stuff, right? Some
exactly.
Well, no, and I am embarrassed. Here's like, as if this was a good podcast, I would have read your book first, right? But but unfortunately, it's this terrible one, and I have not. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to. So I'm going to purchase it for real. So we'll kind of finish this up. Where can they get the book at, right? Where's the best places to buy that at?
Right now, it is on Amazon. It's available as for print and as an ebook.
Really? Okay. Are you planning on doing an audiobook in the future on that? How
if I can, find somebody who could do it for me, do the audio book, that would be cool. I'm not exactly sure the process
Yeah.
on that. I actually have a friend who he wrote books, and he actually had one or two of his books are on audiobook. And he was telling me about his experiences with it. So I want to be really careful.
Well, yeah, no, and I heard a podcast recently where a guy he did the print version, right? But whenever they signed it away, they just kind of made it like a package deal that he sold away the audio version too. And because that's the way they used to do it. Now they're standalone things. Audiobooks weren't popular back then, and now they are. Like, most of us work out or sit. I'm in my car all day for my real job, and I listen to audiobooks all day. And that's why I ask, because it's so perfect to be in the car, listen, and then go work out, listen. That's where I get all my stuff done. But I also can read everything too, and I personally, when I buy a book, I'll have you autograph it, so it'll be even better.
I even got the gold little stickers to put on the book.
Do you really? That say autographed by you? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I want one of those. So just so you know, and a patch and everything else. So I got to get this all done.
All right.
Yeah, no, I'm on it, but I want to make sure you get the money. So for me, though, I guess before we'll do this on here, is it the best way for me to buy it off Amazon or from you directly, or?
You can buy it from me directly. I've got a couple of copies I keep here at the house, and we can meet up one day, and I can.
Yeah, because that way I can get it autographed right then and do all that stuff. Because I think that'd be awesome. I have a good friend, Russ Jones. He is the I'm probably butcher what he did, but he wrote a nice book called The Swamp Man, I believe it was called. But he's the president of the Bigfoot Society of West Virginia. Also works at the gym, and he's got but it's a really cool book. He's spoke a lot of Bigfoot conferences and stuff, and I just think it's awesome that all of us are coming of age now where we're actually doing cool stuff that the things that we used to look at when we were young, and now we're all doing the same kind of things, and it motivates me to do better when I see somebody like you, that you do all this really cool stuff, and instead of being jealous, I'm like, man, I get to get my act together. I need to do better. So thank you for that. I mean, honestly, I really mean that. Like, and hopefully that's my plan. Somebody will watch this and be like, same way. They'll be like, my gosh, he did all this stuff and he continues to do really cool stuff. And, what am I doing? I'm just sitting here or whatever, right? So,
I hope I inspire people, either with my story or just, the stories of me doing martial arts. I hope, they get up and they'll go and try it for themselves. And if not martial arts, but at least something.
Well, yeah, all this stuff, right? You had a desire to write a book. You took a chance. You didn't write books before. You didn't really, and like you said, you were like, you had to work on your grammar, but you didn't let that nothing stopped you. You went ahead and did it. And then went from there. And I think that's the way to do things, right? Like, don't let something like, well, I don't know how to write books. None of us do. Nobody knows how to do anything, right? Until you do it.
Exactly. And this was it was a fun learning process. It's been a fun adventure. Because, I've tried to reach out to a whole bunch of publishers and, get them interested in the book. It didn't happen. So I decided to go a different route and self-publish, and that process in itself, it was interesting to go through. So.
Yeah, well, and just so people know, whatever that book is, or that's also a movie that everybody liked, that 50 Shades of Grey, right? That was a self-published book.
Yeah.
Listen, I haven't watched it, definitely read it. I just want to put that straight out there. I will I will admit that I watched the movies with my wife, but
I didn't.
Yeah, it's nothing that we haven't before. It's fine.
The Martian, that book, the guy just put it out on a website, and people kept going to it, and they're like, hey, can we, you get this like in a Kindle format, so that way we could read it on a easier device. And so he does, and he ends up, putting it at the lowest price possible. And it was like a bestseller. A lot of people just bought it, and then eventually they made it into a movie. And that's one of the other things I'm kind of hoping, that somebody will pick this up and go, hey, this could be a movie. And and now, not to spoil the book, but the main character is a little person.
Oh, really?
And so, yeah. And I don't want to be the person in the movie, but I hope that I can, help bring a little person out and make them an action
Yeah.
star.
Well, and there's a better chance now. Who is the guy that's in that whatever that is? I'm doing a terrible job. That medieval TV show that everybody liked.
Yeah, Peter Dinklage.
Yes, right. So
Yeah,
and honestly, I
Game of
think
Thrones.
he won awards, and instead of just being a little person in a famous show, he's an actor in a famous show, right? That people don't even look at him as a little person anymore.
Exactly. So
Yeah, and I think that's important, right? It's hard to transfer. And same thing, I think initially when people see that maybe that's might would be what they think, but by the end of that, and quite honestly, I didn't get to watch that show too much. Everybody keeps saying it's the best show ever written, except for the last season or something. But my wife just can't get past the magic and the dragons, so we can't watch it. So I've tried several times, and as soon as the dragon starts flying around, she's like, "I'm out. We're good." So I don't know, but I did, yeah. And he was in. Was he an Elf?
yeah, he was an
That guy.
elf, and then he was also in a movie called Pixels. I haven't seen it yet. He was one of the leading roles, I think. But he's been in a lot of movies.
Yeah, in what I know, like even in Elf, right? Like I guess they did make a couple jokes, but they don't make it like a point to say that he's like a little person or anything. They don't really even bring it up in most things, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's awesome, right? Like I mean, like I said, they might say something. I could think, what is that show that I keep saying, that medieval show? What is that?
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. Yeah, like I think at some point, right? Like I think if somebody is trying to make a put down or something, they might say something. But for general in the whole thing, they never say nothing, right? He's out there doing his thing. I didn't see it, but I think does he become the king or some kind of leader at some point, right? Anyway, the
Yeah.
point is, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's a good thing. So hopefully, I mean, it would be amazing if somebody watches this and they're like, hell yeah, let's do this thing. So I think, but nonetheless, if you didn't do it, there's no chance, right? So you've got a solid chance. You're way ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And I was walking through the house one day, and we had just watched some type of action movie, and I was like, man, I wish there was an action movie with a little person as the lead. And
Yeah.
that was one of the things that kind of inspired me. He's like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to write my story. I'm going to get it published. I'm going to get it out there. I mean, at least it's out there. Somebody, if they want to take it and they want to run with it, that's cool. But if I don't, then
Yeah.
I'm never going to know.
No, that's the way to do things, man. Well, you did it. And just so you know, I mean, you're an inspiration to me. You're an inspiration to everybody. And what I mean by that is I am drawn to anybody that does something that I don't do, but anything that does something hard. And writing a book's hard. Taking martial arts when you have some challenges is hard. Doing several martial arts when you have plenty of excuses that you could use is hard. You know what I mean? You did all these things. You didn't bring anything up. And to me, that's inspiring because I don't look at it like, hey, this little person did it. I just look at it like, well, this guy did it. And like, why am I sitting here complaining about anything? Right. And it has nothing to do with size or anything. I do that with everybody. Instead of being jealous, it's more like if I looked at somebody that has a nice house and I'm like, well, I deserve a nice house. Well, if I deserve it, I need to go out and get it. Right. I need to do it. And you're out there doing things and that's impressive. And I really appreciate there's people like you that make the world a better place. So man, I really appreciate all that. That's good. All right, man. Well, we'll call it quits there, man. We'll end on that note. So I really appreciate your time, man. It was good to finally talk to you in person, which is kind of in person. It's 2020 person, right?
Yeah.
So do you have anything you want to conclude with? I know we've said it a couple of times, but let's finish. Where can they find all your stuff? Where can they find your book? And let's get it done.
Yeah. So you can find the book on Amazon. Just type in The Affair, a radio detective agency novel. LD McDonnell. You can find it there. It's in print and it's also on Kindle as well. There's also a Facebook page. You can go to that. I've got some links through there. I've sprinkled here and there. And if you want a Karate Kicking Dwarf shirt, and just go to Karate Kicking Dwarf's Facebook page. I used to have a website, but I don't anymore. So I can reshare the links. And if you want a patch, just let me know and I'll get some more made.
Yeah, that sounds perfect, man. Well, I appreciate your time, man. And you have a good night and a great new year.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man. Take care, buddy.
Okay.